number 10 spot, we have the Master of the Rebel Angels. This painting was painted by an anonymous artist in the second quarter of the 14th century. This painting is a depiction of falling angels and the rebellion of Lucifer, aka Satan himself. So yeah, it definitely has haunted vibes. Even though it is painted over a vibrant yellow backdrop, the angels and the demons in black truly make you feel uneasy to look at it. It looks like the demons are flying after the falling angels, and Lord knows what the artist thought that the demons would do with these angels once they caught up with them. Probably eat them. The bottom of the painting depicts a sphere, which we can only imagine is probably the world, so we can guess that the angels and the demons are falling onto Earth. Apparently this painting was very popular to debate about in the Middle Ages, probably because some thought it to be haunting and real. In our number 9 spot, we have Jailbreak, Saint Ranierius. Jailbreak, Saint Ranierius, painted by famous medieval artist Il Sassetta, who was alive between 1392 to 1450. There is much speculation over whether this painting is scary or not, and I just have to say, heck yes it is. Just look at it. On the left side you see a bunch of people running away, which we can only assume by the title are people from jail escaping. One guy is still trying to get out of the hole, trying to escape, but floating above him is definitely a demon-like man, possibly a ghost. He's putting out his hand as if he's about to put a spell on the person trying to escape, as he seems too far away to arrest him or anything else. In any case, what the heck was this painter thinking? We can definitely either conclude that he had quite the imagination and clearly would be a modern-day scary movie enthusiast if alive today, or he witnessed this in real life, as it has a very strong energy that you usually feel in work that holds some truth. In any case, I think we can conclude that this painting may be haunted. It's definitely creepy. In our number 8 spot, we have The Children of Edward by Paul Delaroche. This painting is haunting to me because of the history behind it. The people depicted in the painting appear afraid and huddled together. They are the two princes, Edward V and the Duke of York, that were possibly killed by their uncle, Richard III, although there is much speculation over this. As the history goes, Richard III took the throne away from Edward V in 1483 and had him and his brother declared illegitimate. This is actually one of those historical mysteries that will probably never be solved, but the energy behind this painting that was made by Paul Delaroche in the early 1800s is what makes it chilling. Paul must have been a history buff. I bet you the spirits of these two princes haunt the painting today. In our number 7 spot, we have St. Peter of Verona, St. Peter the Martyr. This is a painting done by Ambrosio Bergoglione around 1494. At first glance, this is a painting of a guy who's wearing a cape beside a woman that's praying. This one could go over your head, like it did for me, unlike it did for this guy in the painting. If you zoom into his head, you will see a knife in his head. So this looks like it was perhaps a pleasant moment, but then a knife is thrown at this man's head and probably 1 second later he crumbles to the ground, dead. The background of this painting is bright and happy, and I feel like this painting symbolizes how you can at one moment be so happy and blissful, and just like that, something bad could happen and your day becomes dark. In fact, this is a painting of St. Peter the Martyr, who was assassinated for trying to convert people back to Catholicism. 1 minute everything seems fine, the next, it wasn't. In our number 6 spot, we have St. Francis of Assisi receiving stigmata. This is a picture painted by Giotto di Bondone around the year 1295. Some may say beautiful, I say maybe a little dark. This painting feels dark to me. I mean, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but it definitely feels dark. Apparently it kinda is. St. Francis of Assisi was receiving wounds or pain corresponding to the crucifixion wounds of Jesus Christ. Now the angel kinda looks like Jesus, so perhaps Jesus himself is giving them to St. Francis, but in any case, some kind of angel or ghost is hurting him and so therefore haunting him, and so this picture is a bit creepy and probably haunted. Like my conclusion? Hopefully you do. In our number 5 spot, we have the Nymph and Satyr. This painting is also known as Jupiter and Antiope, painted by Jean-Antoine Watteau between 1714 to 1719. So when looking at this girl, you think, okay, she's peaceful, sleeping soundly, and then you look at the man and he literally looks like the devil, so you immediately feel uneasy. It's because this painting was supposed to depict a woman who was seduced by a satyr in the form of what she thought was Zeus. So she was tricked, and when she awakes, she will feel gross and foolish, and the energy of the scene that is about to play out is haunting and triggering as a girl. But also the satyr's face is truly quite scary, so this painting is definitely haunted with low vibes. In our number 4 spot, we have the Sabine Woman. Look, YouTube is strict with what you can and can't say on here, so the title of this painting has to be changed so that we don't get, dinged. I want you to add the letter R in front of the word ape, and then you should have the ape of the Sabine Woman. This was painted by Nicolas Poisson between the years 1637 and 1638. The very name of this painting is chilling, especially when you look at the picture and see all of the women clearly trying to escape. The men have this sort of evil, joyous look on their face that could haunt any girl's dream. This painting just has weird vibes, and if it is not actually haunted by all the mistreated women throughout time, it is definitely haunted with the energy of their sorrows. In our number 3 spot, we have David with the Head of Goliath. David with the Head of Goliath is a painting that was painted by Guido Reni in 1606. This painting is based off of the very epic tale of David and Goliath, a tale of a man becoming a prince and beheading a giant. A classic tale of the strength of what appears to be a not so strong male defeating what appears to be a very strong giant. So yeah, even though the tale isn't really that scary, it doesn't make the painting any less creepy. It's a man holding a giant's head, or just, a person holding a head in general is creepy. Side thought though, are we really to believe that a pretty skinny man like this one with no chest muscles defeated this big giant? Come on. He either had wit and brains coming out of his arse and tricked the giant, or the painter himself was skinny and fancied the idea of defeating something that he most likely wouldn't defeat without the help of someone with muscle. People have agreed online that regardless of the story, the beheaded head is creepy. Do we think it's haunting to look at? I'm undecided. Would love your thoughts in the comment section below. In our number 2 spot, we have The Death of Sardanapalus. This is a painting done by Eugene Delacroix between 1827 and 1844. This is a painting that was made to tell the real-life story of Sardanapalus. Apparently, the painting depicts a pretty merciless man who's lying on his bed with his jewels, overlooking a scene of chaos. We have an undressed woman being hurt in the back by another male. We have many lying on the bed looking dead, and just faces that show anger and pain. The energy of this painting is just low. You can feel the suffering through the painting, and it gives me shivers. This is one of the Louvre's most controversial paintings for how dark it is. I mean, the Louvre has quite a lot of dark paintings, so I find that to be interesting, but in any case, it feels haunted, so we're gonna go with that. In our number 1 spot, we have Dante and Virgil in Hell. I mean, if there was going to be any painting that I was going to say that is most likely to be haunted, it was definitely going to be the one that depicts creatures coming out from the fiery pits of hell. This was yet another painting done by Eugene Delacroix in the year 1822. The painting was inspired by the famous Italian poet Dante, and more specifically inspired by his piece Divine Comedy. The painting shows 2 men crossing a river and being tormented by the souls of the dead, or to be more precise, the souls from hell. In the far bottom left of the painting, you will see what looks like a demon just staring at you. I'm convinced that a demon just hides in this painting and forever stares at everyone through it, because it is truly creepy to look at. On second thought, it could be looking at the body in front of it, or it could be looking at you because the eyes are white, so it's kind of hard to know. Then there's another demon in the middle back that is clearly staring straight at you and cursing you with its death stare. So we have to conclude that this painting is definitely haunted.
Number 10. Curse
cursed Maori warrior masks. Maoris are indigenous people of New Zealand, and according to Maori tradition, the warriors carve and paint masks before a battle, and it's said if they die, their spirits live on within the mask. The warrior mask is an important part of their tradition. Now, Maori tradition dictates that a menstruating woman is tapu or taboo, and so are the masks. So if both of them come into contact with each other, it would invoke a curse. Also, pregnant women are considered sacred. So a Maori museum in Wellington, New Zealand tells pregnant and menstruating women to stay away from several sacred Maori artifacts, including traditional Maori warrior masks, as they could invoke a curse. If this could happen, why would they even show it off? This would stress me out if I went or even worked in this museum. Number 9. Thomas Busby's chair. Popularly known as Busby's stoop chair, this wooden chair is cursed by the spirit of Thomas Busby, who by the way was known to end the lives of many people. In 1702, before being put to death for his crimes, he requested to have a meal in his favorite local pub. Upon finishing his meal, he stood and said, "My sudden death come to anyone who dare sits on my chair." And ever since then, 63 people who dared to sit on the chair met untimely and terrifying deaths. World War II pilots who took turns in the chair perished during battle, a delivery man died in a car crash right after trying the chair out in the 1970s, and so on. In 1978, the pub's landlord gave the chair to the Thirsk Museum, along with strict instructions for it to be suspended above the floor, and it has been hanging there ever since. Number 8. The Crying Boy painting. The Crying Boy painting was painted by Italian painter Giovanni Braglin. Copies were widely distributed from the 1950s onward. The curse related to the Crying Boy painting began when it was reported that many houses containing the copy of the painting caught fire. But this painting was always found undamaged amidst the burnt ruins. An Essex firefighter claimed that in a number of houses destroyed due to a fire, they have found a copy of this painting. Surprisingly, none of these paintings were damaged, even though nearby things had been burnt to ashes. He also stated that no firefighter would allow a copy of the painting in his own house. Now, this news spread like wildfire, pun not intended, and people started removing the painting from their homes, believing it was cursed. Number 7. The Woman from Lemb statue. The Woman from Lemb statue is nicknamed the Goddess of Death, and you'll soon find out why. This limestone statue was unearthed at Lemb, Cyprus in 1878. Dating from 3500 BC, its real purpose is unknown, but it may have been a fertility statue. This little innocent looking statue has become famous for the deadly effect it's had on each of its owners. The statue has belonged to at least 4 different families, and each one suffered a great amount of tragedy once they started owning it. Lord Elfont was the first owner. Within 6 years of buying the statue, all 7 of his family members passed away. The second owner, Ivor Mensusi, and his whole family died within 4 years of attaining the statue. The third owner, Lord Thompson Knoll, suffered the death of his whole family also within 4 years. The statue eventually ended up as property of Sir Alan Beaverbrook, and he, his wife, and their 2 daughters were the next to die. Seems cursed to me. So to try to stop the curse from harming anyone else, Beaverbrook's 2 surviving sons donated the statue to the Royal Scottish Museum in Edinburgh. After that, the museum curator who handled the statue died within a year. Today, the Woman from Lemb statue remains tucked away safely behind glass at the museum, where it can't cause any more harm. Well, hopefully. Number 6. Cursed Mirror at Myrtle's Plantation. A historic home and former plantation, the Myrtle's Plantation in St. Francisville, Louisiana is considered one of America's most haunted places. The plantation house is rumored to be on top of an ancient Tunica Indian burial ground, which is just like, duh, of course it's haunted. It is home of at least 12 ghosts, and it's often reported that 10 people had their lives ended in the house. There are many creepy legends surrounding this property, and the tale of the cursed mirror is one of the most famous. According to legend, the former owner of the house, Sarah Woodruff, and her 2 daughters were poisoned by their slave and are trapped inside the mirror. Visitors of the house report seeing handprints, strange marks, and even figures dressed in old-fashioned clothes lurking in the mirror. I feel like being trapped inside a mirror would suck. Number 5. Screaming Skull of Burton Agnes Hall. An Elizabethan manor house in the village of Burton Agnes, England is
home to a paranormal object known as the Screaming Skull. Okay, just the name of the Screaming Skull terrifies me because, like, how? Well, the skull belonged to Catherine Ann Griffith, who died in the house in 1620 after being attacked by bullies. Every night, a terrifying ghost is seen roaming around the skull, making tremendous noises and scaring out everyone who tried to remove the skull. Now, why does Anne do this? Well, she was somewhat of a troubled girl, and she told her sisters that she would never rest unless part of her could remain in our beautiful home as long as it shall last. She made them promise that when she was dead, her head would be served and preserved in the hall forever, and the sisters hesitantly agreed. But when Anne died, she was buried in the churchyard. Then the ghost would come to the house at night and scare everyone. But remembering Anne's dying words, the sisters took counsel with the vicar and eventually agreed that the grave should be opened. The skull was brought into the house, and so long as it was undisturbed, the hall was peaceful and untroubled. Many attempts have been made to get rid of it, but they never could, and it should honestly just stay there forever. Number 4. Annabelle doll. Okay, it's not a haunted list without a haunted doll, now is it? The Annabelle doll is probably one of the best known haunted dolls in history. Bought in an antique shop in 1970, a woman gave a Raggedy Ann doll to her daughter Donna, who was in nursing school. Let me just say, I had my own Raggedy Ann doll growing up, and it always gave me the chills. Now, Donna and her roommate Angie kept coming home to find the doll in different positions and different locations. Then the doll began leaving them notes reading help. A psychic told them the girl was possessed by the spirit of a girl named Annabelle who had died at the location where their apartment complex had been built. But the girl's friend Lou thought there was something more sinister about Annabelle, and she levitated up his body and strangled him until he passed out. The next night, the roommates heard what sounded like someone in the next room. Lou investigated, and he was found screaming with 2 massive claw marks on his chest, although no one else was in the room except Annabelle. The girls called Ed and Lorraine Warren, who decided the doll was actually a conduit to hell that a demon was using. 2 exorcisms didn't work, and the Warrens took Annabelle home. Upon arriving home, Ed and Lorraine placed the doll in Ed's study, and the doll levitated and around the house. Even when placed in a locked office in an outer building, the Warrens claimed that she would turn up later inside the house. Finally, the Warrens decided to lock Annabelle up for good. The Warrens had a specifically made glass and wood case constructed, upon which they inscribed the Lord's Prayer and St. Michael's Prayer. For the rest of his life, Ed would periodically say a binding prayer over the case, ensuring that the sinister spirit and the doll remained good and trapped. Number 3. The Little Manny. A 3-inch tall stone head is known as the Little Manny with Daddy's Horns. Strange name, I know. After a cleaning lady stumbled upon it in a basement floor in Manchester, England, local scholars Tony Ward and Pat Ellison Reid explored the site and found evidence of a strange ritual. As Manchester Museum curator John Prague said, it was around a circle of candle holders, and inside the circle they found the remains of chicken and har bones, ivory counters used for scoring at billiards, and other offerings including a mother figure's whose head had been broken off accidentally. Since the Little Manny looked a lot like Celtic stoneheads, everyone generally assumed that's what it was. But when it was displayed at the Manchester Museum in 1991, a visitor identified it as Nomoli, hope I said that right, a type of figure from Sierra Leone. While Nomoli is known to bring strong harvests and other good fortune, the Little Manny seemingly brought a fair amount of bad luck to its British handlers. Manchester Museum staff members suffered car accidents, bike accidents, burglaries, broken pant zippers, and all manners of trouble. Pat actually plucked some hairs from her own head and wrapped them around the statue, claiming that it would be, as Prague called, much warmer and friendlier now. Number 2. Dybbuk box. In Jewish folklore, a dybbuk is an evil spirit. Supposedly, someone accidentally summoned the demon while using a homemade Ouija board, but managed to trap it inside the wine cabinet. The Dybbuk box came to light in 2001 when Kevin Mannis purchased it and started having terrible nightmares. He then decided to gift the cabinet to his mother, who suffered a stroke the very day she received it. Not just this, but every person who ever owned the wine cabinet has reported experiencing horrible events. The last owner of the cabinet, Jason Haxton, found out that the box possesses the spirit of a malicious Jewish creature called the Dybbuk, Dybbuk, who has the ability to haunt and possess the living. Jason Haxton was the director of the Museum of Osteopathic Medicine. He not only had nightmares, but developed a strange skin disease and began coughing up blood. At that point, Jason contacted his local rabbis, sealed the Dybbuk back in the box, and then hid it from the world. And coming in at number 1 is the Iceman. The mummy of Otzi, aka the Iceman, was found in 1991 in the Otzal Alps, Italy. It's believed that the Iceman belonged to 3000 BCE, and his body was preserved because of a glacier that surrounded him after he died. However, soon after his discovery, people who were involved with his discovery began to die due to violent accidents. Forensics pathologist Rainer Henn died in a horrific car accident, mountaineer Kurt Fritz died in an avalanche, and hiker Helmut Simon died after falling off a dangerous hidden path. The Iceman then claimed 3 more lives in quick succession between 2004 and 2005. It's thought that anyone who comes in contact with the Iceman will die, and people believe that the discovery of the Iceman is a curse and has the power to destroy mankind. All I'm saying is I would never get close to him.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Anna Baker's wedding dress. In 1836, a man named Elias Baker purchased a mansion in Altoona, Pennsylvania and moved his small family in. Elias's oldest daughter was named Anna, and when she fell in love with a steel worker, things took a dark turn. Anna's father didn't want her dating this man, but she kept doing it in secret. The story goes that Anna and the man planned a secret wedding and were going to elope. Unfortunately, Elias found out and freaked out. He apparently purchased this steel mill that the man worked for and then forced him to have to move to an entirely different city so as to prevent him from being able to continue seeing Anna. Anna, of course, was furious with her father, and I'm sure this was only made worse by his decision to offer other men to her, to which she of course declined because that's just weird. Anna instead locked herself in a room with her wedding dress that she never got to wear. Anna unfortunately never married after that and spent the rest of her life being terribly upset about the whole incident. After her death, it is said that her anger and despair ended up going into the wedding dress. Members of the Baker family reported seeing the dress in different places around the house, despite no one moving it themselves. Some have even reported seeing Anna's spirit dressed in the gown around the house as well. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Golden Eagle. This car was a 1964 Dodge 330 limited edition, and it has been blamed for the death of around 14 people, which, like, how do we even let it get that out of control? It is said that the car started out as a police car originally, but there were 3 officers assigned to this car who all ended up taking their lives and other people's lives in horrible ways. Not in the car, but still super weird that this all seemed to happen after they had been using the cars for work. Because of this strange correlation, it ended up being sold off to another man. Throughout the 80s and 90s, it is said that because of the rumored cursed car, it became a point of interest for vandals. People began vandalizing the car only to meet their own untimely fates, which were all met in strange ways. For example, it was said that one vandal died from being struck by lightning. It is said that the curse is so strong that one person decided to merely touch the car, and it sent him into madness as he went on to commit atrocious crimes after that I cannot even detail here on YouTube. The car now belongs to Wendy Allen, who supposedly collects and decorates haunted cars for a living, so it seems as though it's finally found its home, far, far, far away from anyone else. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Blarney Stone. For hundreds of years, the Blarney Stone has resided within Blarney Castle, which is near Cork, Ireland. The stone is a piece of limestone, and legend says that those who give the stone a smooch will then be given the gift of the gab. This little smooch can bestow the power of being able to talk your way out of any situation, which would be incredibly useful, but there are those who always try to indulge in too much of a good thing. The issues start when you attempt to take a piece of the stone, no matter how small, away from its home. Those who don't follow the rules and take the stone end up being cursed with bad luck. Every year the castle receives parcels from greedy tourists who tried their luck at stealing portions of the stone. These parcels are returned with the intention of lifting the curse of misfortune. It is said that once the stone is returned, the curse will be lifted, which is most definitely good news. So I guess the moral of this curse, however, is to not be greedy and to just follow the rules. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Terracotta Army. The Terracotta Army was discovered in China, and it is a massive piece of funerary art that is thought to be one of the most massive archaeological finds of modern times. It truly is incredible, and it's something that's been attracting tourists from all over the world since its discovery, but for those who did the discovering, well, things haven't been going so well. In 1974, there were 7 farmers who happened to stumble upon this huge discovery, and you would think that this would come with some kind of a reward, but instead, things have been going terribly for them. Soon after the discovery, the government claimed their farmland. After this, their homes were demolished in order to make way for the exhibition halls and gift shops that were to come. They didn't just get nothing for the discovery, they ended up losing because of it. This is exactly why many people believe that perhaps with the unearthing of this huge piece of art, they also dug up some sort of curse that was buried long ago. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Myrtle's Plantation Mirror. Myrtle's Plantation is located in St. Francisville, Louisiana, and it is said to be one of the most haunted places in the entire world, which seems like that would make a lot of sense. One of the reasons for this spooky reputation is because of a mirror that resides inside of it. It is said that this mirror holds the spirit of Sarah Woodruff and 2 of her children. Legend goes that a woman named Chloe was a slave at the plantation, and she drew up a sort of plan to get revenge on the owners of it, Sarah and her husband. Chloe baked a cake full of poison for them, but in the end, the rest of the family except for the husband ended up consuming the poisonous cake. When they passed away, it is said that their spirits went into the only mirror that was uncovered at the time, thus this haunted mirror was born. People who have since visited the plantation have claimed to see the family in the reflection, as well as handprints on the glass, despite the continuous polishing. In our number 5 spot today, we have tap shoes. These tap shoes were listed on eBay, and they are cute as can be. They're black shiny ones with a red bow to tie them together. They look recital ready, but apparently they haven't been used in a long time, and the reason behind it all is chilling. Legend goes that these shoes once belonged to a little girl who loved to dance. At some point, the shoes were retired, and she would go on to meet an untimely fate. The shoes ended up being placed with other old memento items and put in a closet and sort of forgotten about. The shoes, as well as the other items with it, ended up being part of an estate sale years later, but the spirit of the person who passed may have already had some other ideas about what they wanted to happen to the shoes. The seller of the shoes reported that there were mysterious happenings surrounding the shoes as they were clearing out their late aunt's house, the person who was the owner of the shoes. They explained that there were mysterious knocking sounds coming from inside of the closet, almost as if the shoes were tapping by themselves. Also, as it turns out, the house had quite a gruesome history that included killings, so if not the aunt's ghost, perhaps there's another one lurking somewhere in there. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Dark Mirror. This mirror now resides with the Traveling Museum of the Paranormal and the Occult, but prior to that, this mirror was received from the owner who had purchased it from a psychic fair. It is believed that this mirror was created sometime around the 1820s or 30s, and it is actually quite beautiful to look at, despite the sinister things it seems to hold. The owner who gave it to the museum explained that every time they peered into the mirror, they saw these extremely upsetting things while looking into the dark mirror's reflection. The museum has said that since they added the mirror to their collection, there have been guests who have also reported the same kind of things. Guests have claimed to see things reflected back at them, like sightings of their own corpse. In our number 3 spot today, we have the water jug. Okay, estate sales are weird places. There are weird things there, some quirky items, but this has got to be one of the strangest on a whole bunch of different levels. It's a decorative drinking jug, but it's being held in a miniature cart that's being pulled by a porcelain donkey. I truly could not make that item up, nor could I make up the fact that this kitschy item is also apparently haunted. The seller of this item spoke about how he grew up with the item around, as it was always displayed at his grandmother's house and that she always kept it full of water. This was all fine and dandy until after she passed away and he was taking care of the estate and he bumped into it. How was this jug filled with water when no one was there to fill it? He thought that perhaps it was just old leftover water and he just ignored it, but the same thing seemed to happen repeatedly. And it wasn't even like the water level was staying the same. It would increase, seemingly all on its own. The seller decided that this was not an item that they wanted to hold on to and decided it would be best to pass on to someone who was ready to take on this mysterious, strange object. In our number 2 spot today, we have Letta the doll. Before we really dive into this one, can we just acknowledge how all cursed dolls look like they would be a cursed doll? I mean, like Annabelle, Robert, they both totally look like dolls that would be holding a secret, scary curse. And this doll, Letta, is just another one that we can add to that list. Letta is a doll that is said to be around 200 years old and is extremely cursed. This doll is called Letta for short, as its full name is Letta Me Out. really clever. The doll was originally found underneath a house, which definitely feels like the origin story of a haunted doll. The creepy discovery came 47 years ago. Letta still lives with the man who found him. The hauntings of Letta include things like the doll walking around on its own at night, the owners finding objects around the house that have been moved into odd places. Some people have even seen Letta move right in front of their own eyes, and the owner also reports finding little doll-sized scuff marks around the home as well. It is said that this doll once belonged to someone who passed away while holding it, thus their spirit became trapped inside of the doll. Apparently one day in an interview about Letta, as the interviewer was asking questions about the person who passed, the doll began to move in her lap. Yeah, no thank you. Letta has his own Instagram and Facebook page in case you want to hear more about all of the creepiness surrounding this cursed doll. In our number 1 spot today we have the mask. This metal mask resembles the face of a monkey. It's definitely already a little strange looking, but the story is even more interesting. According to the seller of this item, they explained that they acquired this mask in Thailand, but not before they experienced a supernatural battle where a witch used spells to bind the spirit of a jinn to the mask, trapping it in. Since then, the mask is said to be full of supernatural powers, some of which could bring benefits, but it takes a whole pile of work. This mask is said to have the ability to fend off vampires as well as potentially bring riches to its owner, but it needs some things in return. The entity in the mask needs regular offerings of food and drink, and it also requires the owner to meditate in front of it for 20 minutes 3 times a day. Talk about high maintenance. If a person refuses to do these things while in possession of the mask, it is said that a cruel fate awaits them. I mean, what do you expect when you anger an ancient spirit?
Number 10. The Hands Resist Him. The Hands Resist Him is a painting by Bill Stoneham. It's also known as the Haunted eBay painting, and I can't say that I disagree. The painting is based on a real-life photograph of the artist from around the time he was 5 years old. The painting depicts a young boy and doll in front of a glass door with disembodied hands in the background. A California couple found the painting in an abandoned brewery, but in February 2000, not long after they brought it to their home, they've listed it on eBay with a warning to buyers. It said, "This painting may or may not possess supernatural powers that could impact or change your life." Now, let me just say, if something you're thinking about buying comes with a warning like that, I'd suggest not buying it. The couple claimed their daughter told them that the boy and girl from the painting would fight with each other at night. The ad also mentioned that at one point the boy seemingly exited the picture, which is why they decided to sell. I'm sorry, this just gives me the goosebumps. It sold for $1,025 to Kim Smith, a gallery owner from Michigan. In an interview, she revealed that she's received emails from people who claimed they were repulsed or became physically ill by just viewing a photo of the painting. My suggestion, burn it with fire right now. Number 9. The Bazzano Vase. Legend has it that this silver vase made in the 15th century was given to a bride on the evening of her wedding near Naples, Italy. Sadly, she'd never make it to the altar as her life was ended that very night with the vase in her hands. From there, the vase was passed down her family line, but anyone who took possession of it is said to have passed away soon thereafter, so the family eventually made the decision to hide the vase. Which sounds like a great idea, but in 1988, the vase resurfaced, supposedly accompanied by a note that read, "Beware, this vase brings death." However, when the Bazzano vase was auctioned off for about $2,250, the note had been excluded from the item description, which I feel like was important to include, but whatever. The pharmacist who bought it died within 3 months, more deaths of new owners followed, until finally the curse seemed to go dormant when a desperate family demanded the police take the vase away, and it has not been seen since. Now, wherever it is today, it should stay there and never come out. Number 8. Nightmare Doll. The doll may look like any other, but according to the seller, it's a debuk. A debuk is a term from Jewish folklore that describes a dead person's soul that is stuck in purgatory. Supposedly, it can inhabit an object or the body of a living person. In this case, it's a doll. The seller, who specializes in selling paranormal items that people don't want anymore, says the doll's owner brought it to an antique shop and was told it was a dieback, but didn't know what the word meant. I feel like if you're buying something haunted, you should do your research on it, but maybe that's just me. Soon after, whenever she would open the box it came in or touch the doll, she would suffer from terrifying nightmares of shadow people. This continued for several months until her son took the doll from her to sell it. It sold for $17.49, and I want to know who just ruined their life for $17.49. Number 7. The Bronze Lady. Many people go into Sleepy Hollow in search of its best known spirit, the Headless Horseman. However, they may not be aware of a second local legend which has haunted the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery for over 100 years, the Bronze Lady. She's a bronze statue located in New York's Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. The Bronze Lady was commissioned by the widow of Civil War General Samuel M. Thomas after he died in 1903. The story goes Samuel's widow was unhappy with the statue because its expression seemed gloomy, so sculptor Andrew O'Connor Jr. redid it for her. But instead of just handing over the new head, he called it a monstrosity and shattered it in front of her. Now, much to her dismay, she installed the original figure to watch over her late husband's tomb anyway. And in the following years, nighttime visitors to the cemetery claimed to have heard quiet sobs coming from the Bronze Lady. It was said if you knocked on the door of the general's tomb and looked through the keyhole, you would have a bad dream that night. There was another one where if you slapped her in the face, sat in her lap, and spit in her eye, she would haunt you for the rest of your life. Yeah, I just stay away from there. Number 6. James Dean's car. On September 23rd, 1955, James Dean ran into Sir Alec Guinness at a restaurant and showed off his Porsche 550 Spider. In his autobiography, Sir Alec described the car as sinister, and he told Dean, "Please never get in it. If you get in that car, you will be found dead in it by this time next week." 7 days later, Dean was found dead after crashing the car. Now, the trouble didn't stop there. Surgeon/recreational racer Dr. William F. Esrich rescued some of the Porsche's parts from a junkyard and passed a few to his friend Dr. Troy McHenry. They installed parts in their own cars and then both crashed during a race in October 1956. William survived, but Troy didn't, and whispers of a curse began to spread. The rest of the car went to George Barris, the car customizer. Over the next several years, the Spider supposedly caused a handful of incidents. A garage caught fire while the car was inside, 2 tires blew out while affixed to a different vehicle, and a couple of thieves were injured when trying to steal some of the Spider's remaining parts. George claimed that the car had mysteriously vanished in 1960, and the car has been MIA since. Seems cursed to me though, I wouldn't want to go anywhere near it. Number 5. Baker's wedding dress. In 1854, while visiting her father's company, Anna Baker met and fell in love with one of the steelworkers. Anna kept the romance a secret from her family as she knew her father would prohibit her relationship with one of his employees. This went on for 2 years, and it wasn't long after Anna's boyfriend proposed and she happily accepted. Anna picked out a beautiful wedding dress and the two made plans to marry, but her father found out about the secret relationship and immediately fired Anna's love, threatening him with death if he ever returned. Anna's heart broke and she fell into a deep depression. The only thing she had was the wedding dress. Her house was then turned into a museum with the dress displayed. Now, most of the paranormal activity in the home appears to be centered around the dress. Visitors have witnessed the glass case move while they were in the room, appearing as if someone was trying to get the dress. Others have claimed to see the dress move or have caught glimpses of what appeared to be the dress out of its case floating around. Number 4. Destructive statue. The destructive statue was auctioned in October 2013. It was made by a man named William who enjoyed making sculptures out of unhardened clay. I'm sorry, but this statue just makes me feel uneasy, and according to the item's description, William made this particular statue on the same day he was crushed to death during a tragic work incident at the brickyard. Which is ironic because the statue has the word future carved into it, but William never really had a future after making it. Too dark. Moving on. A coworker saw that the statue was still at the job site when he arrived the next day, so he took it home with him like any reasonable person would do. While nothing strange happened for a few months, things took a turn when he took it out of storage to display in his den. A few days later, the den felt heavy and uninviting. He began hearing doors slam on their own, only to find them wide open. Decorations that were next to the statue shattered on their own, and at one point he found the statue facing the other side of the wall, even though he had never moved it. To make matters worse, first, he then saw a dark shadow or mist as he was walking past the den one night. Completely spooked, he begged his friend to sell it for him, who then put it on eBay. It's so funny that he was so scared to deal with it, he's pawning it off to some other poor soul who will unknowingly experience the exact same thing. Number 3. The Conjure Chest. The Conjure, or the Conjured Chest, is a chest of drawers who has taken the lives of about 16 people. As the story goes, an enslaved man named Remus custom made the item for his enslaver. Jeremiah, displeased with Remus's work, beat him to death. In retaliation, Remus's friends then cursed the chest by scattering dried owl blood in its drawers, and let me just say, those are great friends. But the Grahams used the chest and passed it down their family for 140 years, and death or injury came to anyone who stored their apparel inside. In the mid-20th century, Virginia Carey Hudson Cleveland had 2 of her offspring die, and her husband died after being rushed to the hospital for appendicitis. A neighbor also died after an incident involving a weapon, and all have used the chest. So Virginia enlisted the help of her maid, Sally, to undo the curse. They followed the steps that included curing a dead owl and boiling willow leaves. Sally said that if she or Virginia then died, it would prove that the curse had been broken, and months later, Sally did die. When Virginia's daughter inherited the chest, she opted not to use it, which is why she's the smartest person in that family. Number 2. Robert the Doll. Before there was Annabelle, there was Robert, which is even more terrifying. The 40-inch tall nightmare was created by the German toy company Steiff. In Key West, Florida in 1904, the doll was given to 4-year-old Robert Eugene Otto, who went by Gene. Some reports say it was a present from Gene's grandfather, while others suggested the disgruntled maid of the Ottos cursed the doll before giving it to their young son. It's also possible that the maid cursed the doll sometime after Gene's grandfather gave it to him. Either way, this doll was bad news. Robert the Doll, dressed in a sailor suit of Gene, quickly became his owner's evil alter ego. As legend would have it, whenever Gene's parents would find his bedroom furniture upended or his toys mangled, Gene would say, "Robert did it." Gene grew up, became an artist, got married, and then returned to his childhood house. Gene's wife, Anne, wasn't a huge fan of Robert the Doll, shocking, so Gene set up a new area for him in the attic. Passerbys claimed that Robert would switch positions without any help and would watch them from the window while they walked by. People who actually set foot in the house reported hearing footsteps and laughter in the attic. This activity continued after Gene's death in 1970, when the estate, Robert included, passed into the hands of one Myrtle Reuter. And coming in at number 1 is the Devil's Chair. This story goes like this. Lorraine and Ed Warren helped exorcise a possessed boy named David Glatzel in the early 80s. During his exorcisms, this chair would allegedly rock on its own, levitate, and even vanish and reappear. David and Lorraine also claimed to have seen the devil sitting in it. Witnesses say the final exorcism concluded when the demon fled David's body and entered Arnie Cheyenne Johnson, a man who ended the life of his landlord months later during an argument and claimed it was due to demonic possession. Now, if this sounds familiar, it is. This story is the inspiration for the 3rd Conjuring film. Now, Ghost Adventure star Zach Bagan purchased the chair to be on display in his museum, but he had been forced to shut down his haunted rocking chair exhibit. While Zach and a friend noticed the door to the chair's room slowly creak open all by itself, Zach also said a light focused on the chair went out when a power cord was mysteriously yanked out of the wall. 2 hours later, he says a woman collapsed, began bawling, and asked, "Why is this happening to me?" Shortly thereafter, she fell unconscious, according to Zach, who adds the woman was upstairs, directly above the rocking chair exhibit. Later, Zach said 5 of his tour guides throughout the museum started crying uncontrollably. After just a few tours on opening night, the stress was too much for Zach, and it forced him to shut it down altogether for the night. For now, Zach says the haunting rocking chair exhibit is closed until further notice. But in the middle of 2022, YouTubers Sam and Colby, who are paranormal investigators, that I love by the way, were given special permission to not only see or touch the chair, but to sit in it. The results were insane, and they are braver than me.
Starting us off at number 10 is the death van. During the mid to late 90s, Dr. Jack Kevorkian became a notorious figure after being convicted for second-degree homicide for his role in the voluntary euthanasia of over 130 patients. Through the trial, his reputation earned him the nickname Dr. Death. and he ended up being sentenced to 10 years for his deeds. Now, despite the negative narrative, the doctor always fought back, claiming to be aiding the terminally ill end their lives on their own terms, and had set up an old 1968 Volkswagen van to get the job done. Now, whether you believe he was innocent or not, the fact of the matter is that at least 130 people died in this van, so naturally it has developed quite the reputation as a haunted object. So much so that at one point in time it was being sold on eBay for nearly $4,000. However, nowadays you can find it at the eternally haunted Zach Bagans Museum, where the ghosts of those who died are said to wander the museum, spooking visitors at all hours of the day. Coming up next at number 9 is Wheelie. Some say it's a stuffed dog, while others say it looks more like a sheep, but either way, it's an old, creepy, haunted toy from the 19th century that can be found in the Prince Edward Island Museum in Canada. Nicknamed Wheelie due to the creaky wheels the stuffed animal sits on top of, this nearly 200-year-old toy was found lying inside the walls of the Yeo house while construction was underway. According to staff, the disfigured sheep dog toy was simply lying on the ground inside the walls, and so they decided to keep it and put it out on display for their visitors, which would be all well and fine, except for the fact that it very well may have been hidden in a wall for a reason. Apparently, Wheelie is known to wander around all by himself, and is often found hiding in a different spot than where he was left the night before, which, if horror movies have taught me anything, is never a good sign. Coming in at number 8, hair. Now, I will admit this is not a single object that can be found in a haunted museum, but it is definitely an exhibit that will make your skin crawl. Inside the Avanos Hair Museum in Turkey, yes, you heard that right, is literally a floor-to-ceiling cave-like room with countless little snippets of hair surrounding you at every angle. In fact, to be exact, there are 16,000 different hair samples adorning the walls. I'm sure you're wondering how such a museum began in the first place. Well, the common folklore is that a local potter once asked a dying friend to leave him a snippet of her hair to remember her by. The friend obliged and cut a small piece of her locks for the potter. From there, the potter placed the gift in his shop, and apparently this inspired visitors who began following in her footsteps and gifting locks to be displayed in his shop along with the original, until eventually the shop was overrun by hair. And don't worry, if you want in on the fun, or creepiness depending on your feeling about hair, guests are encouraged to leave behind a little sample themselves. Just ask the staff for some scissors and your wishes will be granted. Coming in at number 7, the dark mirror. Found in the Museum of the Paranormal and Occult, this dark mirror is said to show you much more than you will ever want to see. The Mobile Museum obtained this cursed mirror from the original owner, who claimed to have purchased it while attending a psychic fair in the Columbus area. Now, there are lots of alleged cursed mirrors out there, some said to be haunted by demons who escape in the night, torturing whoever possesses the cursed glass, which, don't get me wrong, is definitely terrifying. However, this particular object has more of an eerie, foreboding quality that is sure to send anyone who looks into it into a spiral. According to the museum, those that dare gaze into the cursed mirror claim to be struck with very upsetting visions. Some even reported ghastly sightings, such as their own corpse staring back at them. Coming in at number 6 is Einstein's brain. In the famous Medical Mutter Museum in Philadelphia is none other than the brain of world-famous theoretical physicist Albert Einstein, or at least parts of it are there. And almost as peculiar as having sections of his brain preserved in glass slides and displayed is the story of how the genius brain wound up at the museum in the first place. Apparently, after he died in 1955, pathologist Thomas Harvey was the one to perform his autopsy. But unbeknownst to the family, he decided to remove Einstein's brain for preservation in the hopes that scientists of the future could study it to determine what made Einstein so intelligent. Eventually, after much reluctance, Einstein's son agreed to allow the brain to be kept under one very strict condition, that it be used for scientific research. Now, with permission from his next of kin, Harvey went forward, slicing the brain into 240 pieces, making sure to preserve each piece very carefully. Over the next few decades, Harvey would send bits and pieces to researchers upon request, and eventually donated the rest to this very museum it resides in today. Coming in at number 5 is Annabelle. Okay, I know we're all pretty aware of the cursed demon doll, but I just couldn't help it. I mean, she is one of the most terrifying things you can find in a museum after all. Although nowadays she's locked up tight in the famous paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren's occult museum, this wasn't always the case. Back in 1970, Annabelle was gifted to a nursing student named Donna, but it didn't take long before Donna and her roommate Angie knew that something was off. After about a month, the roommates began finding disturbing messages lying around their apartment, warning them to help Lou. Lou was one of their friends who had apparently warned the girls of the doll since day one. Eventually, things got so creepy that the women contacted a medium who told them to not be afraid, that the doll was merely possessed by a young girl named Annabelle Higgins, who had died on the property years prior. The medium advised them that Annabelle felt really safe here and would like to stay, so they agreed. But that was all part of the demon's plan. Not long after, Lou stayed over, and when he awoke from a nightmare, he found he couldn't move his body. And then, like straight out of a horror movie, he says Annabelle walked up his body and strangled him until he passed out. After that, the girls contacted a priest who put them in touch with the paranormal investigators, Ed and Lorraine Warren, who discredited the medium and said it was, in fact, a dangerous demon possessing the doll. However, even now, despite being locked up, the doll should be deeply feared. It was reported one man who visited the museum mocked the doll and only a few days later died after losing control of his motorbike. Next up at number 4, the Hands Resist Him painting. As far as paintings go, The Hands Resist Him, created by William Stoneham in 1972, is probably considered one of the most haunted pieces in the whole world. Stoneham claims the inspiration for the piece came from an old photograph from his early years, and somehow, over time, the painting landed in the hands of a California couple. As the story goes, the sellers who auctioned it on eBay in 2000 kept the painting in their 4-year-old's room. But one morning, the girl claimed that the people in the painting were not letting her sleep at night. So, for the girl's peace of mind, they set up a motion sensor camera to prove that no monsters were coming out of the painting. However, to their surprise, they captured some truly frightening activity. They awoke to find photos of the boy crawling from the painting, and others where the doll's face had changed to a very angry disposition while holding a weapon. Not only that, it's also rumored to have been responsible for the death of 3 men who came into contact with it at one time or another. Today, you can find it in the back room of Smith's Perception Fine Art Gallery in Grand Rapids, Michigan. But be warned, those that witness the painting often complain of nausea or extreme physical pain while in its presence. Coming in at number 3, Ed Gein's Cauldron. So, a little backstory. Ed Gein, aka the Butcher of Plainfield, was a killer and body snatcher between 1947 to 1957. Gein grew up very religious. His mother was a devout Lutheran who taught her sons that women were inherently promiscuous and instruments of the devil. Gein became very attached to his mother, arguably a little too much, and after his father and brother both died, Gein became his mother's primary caregiver. However, after she died in 1945, something
snapped and he became a totally different person. He began to visit the graveyards at night, digging up middle-aged women that had similarities to his deceased mother, before bringing the bodies home and mutilating them, using their skin to make covers for his furniture, masks out of their faces, or using the bones for decoration and dishes. Even creepier was when he began creating an entire woman's suit from various different exhumed bodies, as he wanted to be able to become his mother and literally be in her skin. It is believed that this cauldron was used by Guy to not only store the stolen body parts, but primarily to boil them so that the skin could be removed from the bone more easily. Nowadays, this cursed cauldron is found at the haunted Zak Bagans Museum and is definitely one of the most terrifying things found inside. Next up at number 2, Peter Curtin's head. Inside the Ripley's Believe It or Not Museum in Wisconsin is one of the most haunting objects you could come across: the severed head of a dead man. But who's the guy? Well, none other than the vampire of Dusseldorf, Peter Curtin. To give you a bit of context, Peter Curtin is widely considered one of the most cruel, sick, and deranged men of the 20th century. Between 1913 to 1929, he was a rampant killer and predator, responsible for the death of 10 people, on top of another 31 attempted killings among his 68 crimes total. While in court, he received the nickname Vampire of Dusseldorf for reasons I'm sure you can imagine, and after freely confessing to all his crimes with no remorse for his cruelties, he was sentenced to execution via the guillotine. But his atrocities did not end there. In fact, shortly before he was executed, he famously turned to his psychiatrist and asked, quote, "Tell me, after my head is chopped off, will I still be able to hear, at least for a moment, the sound of my own blood gushing from the stump of my neck? That would be the pleasure to end all pleasures." Following his beheading, his head was then bisected and his brain was removed in order to be studied. The rest of his head, however, was mummified, transferred to the United States, and put on display for the world to see. And last up today in the number 1 spot, Embark. In 17th century Iceland, there was a well-known witchcraft ritual where people would create pants out of the skin of the deceased in hopes of a better life for them and their families moving forward. Called Embark, meaning corpse breeches, or more commonly referred to as necropants nowadays, the pants were made as a talisman to magically summon more money for whoever made them. However, there was a catch. The man in question had to have consented before death, and the deed could only be done after the burial had taken place. Once loved ones said their goodbyes, you were free to dig up the corpses and peel off the skin, being careful to keep it all in one piece. It was believed that no holes or tears could occur, otherwise the power of the necropants would be lost. But disgustingly, it didn't stop there. Once you had fashioned the pants and put them on your person, the ritual demanded you head out into the village and steal 1 coin from a destitute widow. From there, the coin was to be placed in the groin of the pants, along with a traditional Icelandic sigil for the ritual to be complete. There is only one known pair of such pants remaining today, and it's held in the Museum of Icelandic Sorcery and Witchcraft. And if you ask me, they are just about the most terrifying thing that I can think of.
Coming up at our number 10 spot, we have Zak Bagans' The Haunted Museum. Zak Bagans' The Haunted Museum is called a haunted museum for a reason. Located in Las Vegas, there's some pretty scary stuff in there. It is known for having possessed objects, and it is proud to do so. From a painting with the real ashes of Charles Manson painted into the eyes of a portrait of him, to Ted Bundy's glasses, this is a museum with some of the most low-vibe items from some of the worst criminals, and so obviously it would be haunted and the items would be possessed. I mean, they advertise it in the name, so they own it. In our number 9 spot, we have the Swansea Museum. The Swansea Museum is said to have one very possessed item, the Swansea Devil. This is an item that looks like the devil, and people have confirmed that they definitely think it is haunted. It has a pretty interesting backstory actually. In 1890, an architect by the name of Sir Arthur Bloomfield beat out a local architect for the job of rebuilding the ancient St. Mary's Church, and the local architect was not okay with it. Apparently, a few years later, he ended up purchasing a row of cottages facing the church, and so he tore them down and built a large red brick building there, and he put a statue of a smiling devil on it. He then placed a curse on the church, proclaiming it to be destroyed and that the devil will look upon it and its rebel smiling. Yikes. Jeez, I love that he wants to rebuild a church, a place for love and forgiveness, and then because he doesn't get his way, he fully does everything that he can to make the church a negative place. Clearly a man who studies the Bible and its teachings. Not. Perhaps he didn't get the job because the priests sensed how insane he clearly was. Anyways, the devil statue resides in this museum and it's clearly haunted. In our number 8 spot, we have the Royal Scottish Museum. Ah, the Royal Scottish Museum. That was British, not Scottish, Melissa. It honestly sounds like a classy place to go to. Probably because of the word royal, but whatever. Apparently this museum is slightly terrifying because it is the holder of one very possessed item. An item so haunted that if you touch it, you will die, as well as your family. Not joking. The woman from Leb statue is at this museum, and it has been known to belong to many families that have all passed away after owning it. Within only 6 years of owning it, all 7 members of this one family passed away. This actually happened a few times until it was donated to the museum. The artifact is said to be from 3500 BC, but was found in Cyprus in 1878. So yeah, to say that the museum is showcasing a possessed object would be an understatement. In our number 7 spot, we have the Louvre. The Louvre, located in France, is one of the most beautiful museums in the world. Honestly, it is one of my favorite places to visit in the world, even though it definitely has 1 or 2 or 10 possessed paintings on display. From Dante and Virgil in Hell, to the Sabine woman, to the Children of Edward, to St. Peter of Verona, I have literally made another whole video on the haunted paintings at the Louvre because there's just so many. But of course, there would be. The Louvre houses some of the greatest artists in the history of the world. Of course, there will be some art that is created when a human is having a bad day, but also there are evil people that paint, and that energy would certainly come through in their paintings. But honestly, the Louvre is magical even with the possessed paintings. Put a visit to it on your bucket list for sure. In our number 6 spot, we have the Mutter Museum. The Mutter Museum, located in Philadelphia, is a museum that once started out as a sort of, Ripley's Believe It or Not, and eventually turned into, well, something else. An American medical inventor by the name of Dr. Thomas Mutter donated a bunch of tools and got it off the ground. It's a museum where you can find some odd medical items such as an amputation kit from the Civil War, and my personal favorite, a long human colon that apparently once had 40 pounds of, well, poop. I'm a classy gal. The area that people believe is filled with some possessed items is called the Bone Room. I wonder why. It is a room filled with human skulls. 139 skulls, in fact. Lord knows why. They probably all come alive at night like the movie Night at the Museum. Creepy. The skulls all have descriptions as to how their owners passed away. Like an odd little memorial. Not spooky at all. In our number 5 spot, we have the Museum of Death. The Museum of Death, located in Los Angeles, California, USA, is one of Hollywood's horror museums, in my opinion. It apparently has the largest selection of artwork from serial killers. So yeah, it definitely possesses 1 or 2 haunted items. Oh, and did I mention that the museum has a head as one of its items on display? Yeah, what the heck, right? It's the head of French serial killer Henri Landru. There are crime scene photos from the Manson murders, and also many execution devices. Gosh, as terrifying as this all sounds, why do I still want to go? Curiosity always wins. In our number 4 spot, we have Vent Haven Museum. The Vent Haven Museum is located in Kentucky, and not gonna lie, it fully gives me the creeps. It was created by a man by the name of William Shakespeare Berger. Great name. The museum is famous for its doll collection. Man, I'm not gonna lie, I loved dolls before Most Amazing. Now I find them terrifying. Hopefully I never have to do a haunted Barbie video while working here because that will probably destroy all of my happy childhood memories. Anyways, apparently this museum has 800 dolls. Yeah, a lot of people say that they are haunted, but honestly, if you walked into a space with that many dolls, I'm sure you probably would think that too. In our number 3 spot, we have the Museum of Shadows. Apparently, this museum has gained a reputation for being one of the most haunted museums in the US. It is located in Nebraska, USA. Apparently, it was once a brothel, so maybe that explains the initial low vibes, but in any case, it allegedly has over 1,000 possessed objects from all over the world. There are many reports of paranormal activity coming from the objects over the years, but also people have witnessed ghosts in this place and have heard laughter from time to time. Lovely. In our number 2 spot, we have the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast Museum. This is probably one of the scariest museums that I have ever come across, and that is because it is literally a former crime scene. It was previously the home of Lizzie Borden and her family, and this is the place where 2 of her family members, if you haven't heard the story of Lizzie Borden, well, she was accused of killing her father and stepmother, and most believe this to be true even though she was set free of all charges. They turned her house into an overnight museum, and the place is filled with gruesome photos that are in the rooms where the bodies were found. Apparently there is a celebration breakfast ready for you if you survive the night. Kinda terrifying and awesome at the same time. Most likely this place has a few possessed items lying around. In our number 1 spot, we have the Warren Occult Museum. The Warren Occult Museum in Connecticut is a museum that was opened by Ed and Lorraine Warren in the 80s, and the items inside are items that they accumulated on their travels to help free spirits and clear homes. The number 1 most haunted and supposedly dangerous item in their possession that is possessed is the Annabelle doll, of course. They also have a doll called the Shadow Doll that goes into people's dreams and supposedly stops their heart while they sleep. There is a large man structure that was used for satanic rituals and a human skull used for black magic. I mean, the list goes on and on. These guys aren't even hiding their possessed items, they're just owning them and showcasing them for the world to all get creeped out.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the statue. This statue, or bust, is said to have been made by a man named William who enjoyed making these sorts of things out of clay. Unfortunately, however, legend goes that this specific statue was made on the same day that William was crushed to death during a tragic work accident. A co-worker of his who showed up to work the following day found that this statue was still there, so he took it home with him. For a while, he kept the statue hidden, but when he took it out to display it, things started to go awry. It started with just a heavy and uninviting feeling, but soon things escalated. He began to hear doors slamming on their own, only to go and find them wide open. If anything was placed next to the statue, the next time he would find it completely shattered, and at one point he found the statue in a position that he never placed it in. He finally had the last straw when he saw a dark, shadowy figure, or a sort of mist, moving around near where he placed the statue. After this, he was so spooked he had a friend list the item for him on eBay because he just simply needed to get rid of it. In our number 9 spot today, we have Uluru Rock. Uluru Rock is a large sandstone formation that is located in the southern part of the Northern Territory in Australia. It is sometimes known as Ayers Rock, but regardless of what it is called, this area is sacred for the people indigenous to the land. This is part of the reason that those who visit the rock are asked to not take anything from the site. Despite this, people of course still choose to smuggle pieces of the rock out of the area and home with them. Other than the bad karma and just in general feeling like a bad person for doing the one thing you're asked not to do, as it turns out this rock may hold a more sinister secret. Those who have stolen rocks from the Uluru have experienced things like extremely bad luck, severe illness, and sometimes even the death of those they love. The curse these rocks hold is seemingly so bad that it is very common for the company that runs the tours of the formation to receive letters of apology that contain the stolen rocks. Apparently these letters come so often, at least one a day is expected. Maybe this is a weird coincidence, but it seems to be happening a little too often for that to be the explanation. In our number 8 spot today, we have the beds. Back in 1986, couple Deborah and Alan Tullman moved into a new home with their children in Wisconsin. The following year, they bought a second-hand set of bunk beds for their kids for $100, but as it would turn out, they bought much more than they had originally bargained for. When they brought the bunk beds into their home, they clearly must have brought something else along with it. It started when they began to see strange shapes in their home, and they would hear disembodied voices that, despite how hard they tried, they could cannot find the source of. They found themselves fighting with clocks and radios that turned on by themselves, they would find furniture that had moved seemingly all by itself, and sometimes they'd even see an apparition of an old woman. In the end, they not only threw the beds in the landfill, but they also moved from the home just to be safe. As far as we know, the beds remained in the landfill, but who's to say for sure? In our number 7 spot today, we have the Crying Children paintings. These paintings were a series created by an Italian painter who was known as Giovanni Bregolin, but his name was really Bruno Amarillo. Bruno was born in Venice in 1911 and fought in World War II, which ended up being the inspiration for a lot of his paintings. During his time in the war, he saw a lot of suffering, and this is where he got the idea for the series of Crying Children paintings. After the paintings were sold, there began to be reports of fires in all of the places where the paintings were held. While this could have just been a strange coincidence, the weirdest part is that the paintings always remained intact while everything else around them was burned. This quickly became the most talked about thing and was on the front of every newspaper, and the paintings quickly gained the nickname Diablo. It caused the paintings to end up being replicated and mass-produced, but none of the replicas hold quite the same powers as the originals. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Goddess statue. The Goddess of Death statue is also known as the Woman from the Lem. This artifact was made out of limestone, and it was created somewhere around 3500 BC and was found in Cyprus in 1878. Over the years, it has belonged to many different families who all have been ruined and dismantled by death. After the first 6 years of ownership, all 7 members of the first family died. It then moved on to a second owner, and after 4 years, death began to come to him and his family as well. There was then a long period where it was unclaimed, but once the third family finally got a hold of it, several members of that family began to die as well. The third family ended up turning it over to the Royal Scottish Museum because it is of course an ancient relic, but legend goes that the museum curator who initially took care of it died within a year of receiving it. So maybe the curse lives on. In our number 5 spot today, we have the goblet. This is an item that was found in a museum, but it was a museum of specifically haunted things, so I feel like it still counts. This goblet is said to have been used for rituals of necromancy, which poses a few questions for me personally. What did they put in it and presumably drink out of it? Holy water? Wine? Blood? All the above? Who knows? Either way, here's the real kicker. This goblet was of course for sale on eBay because why not? And the seller was claiming that it has an amazing energy to it. Okay. What kind of energy? Well, they said that some find it strangely positive, but that many perceive it as negative and malignant. Alright. Don't think I'll be bidding on that auction, to be perfectly honest. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Surrey ghost car. On December 11th, 2002, a call came into the Surrey Police Department. The caller reported that they had just seen a car lose control and run off the road and then presumably crash. It was of course an emergency call, but not necessarily anything out of the ordinary. That was until authorities got to the location and realized that they couldn't find any evidence of a crash. They kept searching and ended up finding a maroon colored car that was nose down in a ditch nearby, but this car was covered in so much undergrowth that it must have been here for months. This meant that somehow this crash went undetected for 5 months, and worst of all, so did the body that lay nearby. Using dental records, they were able to identify the body as a man who had been wanted for robbery since July of that year. It is said that the sighting of the car leaving the road was a ghostly replay of the events that had taken place 5 months prior. In our number 3 spot today, we have doorknobs. To be honest, I wasn't expecting to ever hear about haunted doorknobs, but this might just be a thing that really does exist. These doorknobs were listed on eBay, and the seller explained that they were once the knobs seen on the doors at an asylum, which truly lands on the list of creepiest places in the world. Considering everything that is said to have gone on at places like these, it truly doesn't surprise me one bit. We're looking at you, lobotomies and other horrific mental health treatments of the past. These doorknobs must have quite literally opened the door to some terrifying things that I'm sure many of us would prefer to not even think about. According to the eBay listing, the asylum that they came from after it was abandoned is said to have had strange whispers, occurrences, and horrifying noises coming from it. This is all to say that maybe that trip to Home Depot is better than buying antique. Just this one time. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Nightmare Doll. Haunted dolls like Annabelle and even Robert get a lot of hype, but they certainly aren't the only dolls with stories of curses and hauntings behind them. This Nightmare Doll was listed for sale on eBay, and according to the seller, the doll is possessed by a Dybbuk, which is a malicious this demon or entity. The seller of the doll is actually someone who apparently specializes in selling these sort of paranormal items that no one wants anymore. The seller explained that the owner of the doll bought it at an antique shop, and while they did tell her about what the doll held, she didn't know what the word meant, so she took it anyways. Soon after purchasing it, she realized that anyone who came into contact with the doll was then plagued with terrifying nightmares and occurrences of these sort of shadow people. She only could handle this all for a couple of months before she handed the doll over for it to be sold and moved far, far away from her. In our number 1 spot today we have the carving. This is a carving that was sold on eBay in 2013, which the sellers claimed had been in their family for over 60 years. It was originally found by the seller's grandparents in the attic of their home. This was back in the 1950s, and when it was found, the grandparents asked the original owners of the home where it had come from. They explained that it was a gift from a prisoner who is said to have carved it. The seller explained in their post that, quote, anyone who comes in contact with it seems to feel strange or creeped out by it. The statue mostly didn't cause too much harm. That was until the seller tried to put it on display in their home. Once it was taken out of an old box and placed in a cabinet, strange occurrences began. They said that, quote, I began to experience the television turning off and on, lights coming on in rooms no one was in, the kids' toys coming on in the middle of the night in their room at 3 a.m. At the end of the day, despite the troubles this person had with the statue, they still ended up selling it for $85. Not a bad deal. Get rid of a demon and gain some cash for it.